All right.
All right, y'all. We ready to get started?
We are.
Thank you for your patience while I got the clicker working. I wanted to start and just do introductions of who's here. Principal Broadfoot, if we'll start with you and just kind of go around.
All right, great. Charlie Broadfoot, I'm the principal of the Career Readiness Academy at Mosley.
Stephanie Craybill, Board of Education.
Patrice Faison, Chief Academic Officer.
Pat Bradford, Vice Chair, Board of Education.
Melissa Mason, Board of Ed.
April Patterson, Early Childhood Education.
Christy Ann May, I'm the principal at Castlehane.
I'm Lo DeWalt, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
I'm Alicia Montanaro. I'm the instructional coach at Rachel Freeman.
Thank you for joining the committee.
You're welcome.
Maureen Mann, AIG Supervisor.
Great. So I changed our agenda just slightly because I want us to talk about policy 3200, and then I put the quality checklist after that in the agenda that was sent out. Numbers 3 and 4 were flip-flopped, and then we'll end the meeting just reminding folks about the celebration of success and how they can access our curriculum online. So you have a packet in front of you, and the conversation today is really around policy 3200, which is selection of materials. And as you know, we have a robust process in which we've adopted our new ELA curriculums at the middle school and elementary school. But this policy covers all sorts of instructional materials. So materials that are board adopted, like the ones that we've had, as well as items that teachers bring into their classrooms to support and enhance standards, as well as classes that might not have an adopted curriculum. So this policy sort of covers everything. And go ahead, did you want to say something, Dr. Craven?
I didn't know if Ms. Bradford wanted to give a welcome.
Oh.
Welcome.
Thank
you for being here. Let's see if we can't, everybody bring one more person next quarter and we can double our numbers just overnight. So let's try that. Maybe we should offer some food.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hey, Mary Alice.
Hey, Dr. Hudson, how are you?
I'm good.
And so one of the things we want to look at is, or one of the things that we have been kind of looking at is some feedback on this policy to offer to our board members. So we've gotten some feedback from curriculum champions, a group of teachers, curriculum specialists, folks who are on my team, and want to kind of look through potential recommendations, or this is a non-action committee. Am I saying that right, Dr. Brett?
Yes.
It's a non-action committee, but sort of some recommendations that we might make. Would you like to add anything to that?
I just would like to say that the board charged us a couple of months ago to bring back recommendations for policy 3200 and the policy itself, and to review the quality review checklist. So that is why we're here, to just review that, so voices can be heard on that, and that's it.
Yeah. And then you also have in front of you a sample from another school district, and a sample of their policy 3200. So in getting feedback from teachers and curriculum champions, in talking to members of my team, we're sort of wondering what enhancements or shifts might be viable. So if everybody's okay, I'd like to give you maybe just 5 minutes or so, if you're not familiar with ours, to take a look at ours, but really to look at the one from Cabarrus, which is here. And in particular, I'm going to point out a couple different sections that I have for you. So in the Cabarrus one, on the, let's see, what page is it that y'all have?
While you're looking at that, I'll just give you some insight on why Cabarrus.
Okay.
And Cabarrus, last year, we go to Job-alike meetings, and we actually, Cabarrus was a sample for us of what they do. So they provided for us, because they do a lot of things to be very transparent with their community and their parents on this process. So we were provided this sample. And when I looked at this sample and looked at other policies, I thought that this would be something that would be a good place for us to start. And like I said, this was provided to us by our job alike groups. So that's why Cabarrus.
They're also a district that has pretty strong academic performance, and so definitely when we're comparing
Yes.
things, we definitely want to be looking at districts who are,
We're coming after 'em.
you know,
And I
that
made
we're constantly trying to meet up with.
I made a note, they have one more school than us and a couple more students, but other than that, they're fairly
It's
comparable.
Yeah,
Similar
very
size,
similar,
yeah.
very similar to us.
So
And
if
that's
you-
another reason.
So if you look at Cabarrus, and it's on the fourth piece of paper that's in the Cabarrus packet, it's under selection of instructional materials. It says A, definitions, and then B, objectives. Give everybody a minute to get
Are we
there.
looking at policy 3200 or 3210 from Cabarrus?
It's 3,200.
3210 is a component, yeah.
So where it says A definitions and B objectives, I put up on the screen there too, there's 6 objectives that they have there. I think that's really important that they put the objectives of their materials as part of theirs. So we have it in ours, but if you want to compare, we have ours listed A through F, and they have theirs numbered. So if you want to do a little cross comparison
Actually,
here.
on the first page.
But I'll give everybody like 5 minutes or so, just take a look, and then we'll open up some conversation. Were y'all able to find it? I'm gonna do my teacher thing and make sure everybody's got there. Make sure I didn't lose everybody.
You lost me, help me.
Are you all right, Charlie? Okay. And take the teacher out of the classroom. Teacher out. About 2 more minutes to review, and then we'll open it up for some discussion.
And I want to point out a couple of things before we open it up
Okay.
for the committee.
Absolutely. All right. It's been about 5 minutes, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Faison, and then we'll open it up for observations and thoughts.
I would bring the committee's attention to number 3, materials brought in by teachers, and ask if anyone sees any differences there. And if so, what they are.
Where is that? Because you didn't tell
Number
us to
3.
read those. You told us to read the objectives.
Oh, is that it? Oh, I thought,
That's all.
that's
Oh, I
it.
just meant to start there. I didn't mean that was all you were limited to. I'm sorry.
And that's a quick section if you read both of those. Anybody see any differences there?
I'll start. I saw a big difference in the two of them. Like, I tried to read the New Hanover County one first, and I was like, what? And then when I read the second one, I was like, oh, it explains it so much better. So that's my overall broad. In terms of bringing in materials, I hadn't noticed anything specific. I didn't make a note of it.
Anybody else?
I just think that in the Caravas County one, it makes it clear that it's site-based, that it's the principal that kind of sets up the guidelines and everything for each school.
Well, the Cabarrus County one references the standard course of study for teachers, and ours does not.
And then ours has the checklist and theirs does not.
I also like, to your point too, it's the collaboration between the principal and the teacher. So there's,
And I want to go back to the comment about the checklist, because that is a huge difference there. And I just think this committee should know that when we review different districts, we couldn't find another district with, I'm not saying it's not out there, we couldn't find another district that had anything that tried to take all of these resources and put them in this box. So I just think the committee should know that, and I want to highlight that. And I'll let Dr. DeWalt continue on whatever he has.
are there other noticings or things? Yes, Ms. Craven?
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I would think, because the quality control checklist is what was a point of contention recently. And so are we saying that because nobody else does it, that we're doing it and it's not good?
You want to take it, you want me to take it?
I don't think I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not really putting a judgment value on it. I'm saying it's unusual that we have it. It's not comparable to other large districts of our size. And I personally think it's confusing to teachers. So when we put this out for some feedback, some of the questions we got, and you don't have this, I'm just sharing some of the feedback, are things like, does this also apply to teacher-created resources? Is this something, if I'm bringing in several multimedia, now that we're one-to-one, if I've got 5 or 6 different video clips, do I need to fill this out for each one for every lesson? So I think their questions about the checklist are more about the
When do we use it?
when do we use it? How often do we need to use it? What's the process to use it? Which is not I don't believe it's as clear in our policy as it is in the sample one that we're looking at.
And I would say, I'm a little different, just a tad bit different. I say that others do not have it because it is unrealistic.
I
right?
agree with that.
So I think it's unrealistic, and I think for teachers to have to try to create this checklist as they're planning, and then the principal approve it, when does that happen? Right? So, and it's going to either stifle the creativity of the lessons and may hurt what we can present. And I think there's a reason why we don't see it anywhere else. And we have to remember that we see, to my understanding, I have not been here, the checklist was brought due to an event at 1 or 2 schools. So we overcorrected, in my opinion.
And this was multiple. I mean, this was
And this was
multiple
years ago.
years before I.
Yeah, this was years ago.
Here. So, I mean,
So I just wanted to say that.
that's what we.
Anybody else want to chime in on that? On my,
Well, I can speak to that because I've used the checklist for the last several years, and it is a lot to keep up with. What we have done at my school is teachers. If they're going to pull a worksheet that, then that's one thing. Usually they'll bring it to me to like, is this okay if I use this? But if it's something that's actually supplementing the curriculum, this is what they complete. And then in theory, it would be reviewed at our school improvement team meetings, and it's part of the agenda for every school improvement team meeting. But that meeting happens once a month, and teachers aren't always planning for what our school improvement team meeting is tomorrow. So they don't know what they are going to need at the end of October tomorrow in preparation for this. So it becomes very difficult because it requires a committee to review this. And so our workaround has been my instructional leadership team being the committee that reviews this. But I also think that there's things in here that if we're going to have a checklist, there's things in here that are missing. This is very equity focused. And I do think there's things that are also important that aren't captured here.
And I just want to say this one thing, and I want you to think about the time that you have. You have a district curriculum, and how many students do you have?
494.
Right. So when we think about our high schools with over 2,000 students, and they don't have a district curriculum. So I just want to point that out and the feasibility of this. I just have to
I agree.
point that out for teachers and principals. The time, when does this occur, is my question.
Yeah.
And also, to go along, is that if you're trying to keep things relevant and current, to do that, and your school improvement team only meets once a month, if something happens in the world and you want to use a clip or an article, of something that's occurring now, it would be.
And that was exactly the feedback from our teachers as well, was that does this checklist discourage teachers from being innovative with teacher practice? Because does it discourage relevant real world examples? And so I don't think they were saying they weren't willing to do the checklist. I don't think it was that. I think it was, what's the turnaround time for us to be able to actually do it?
And there are classes that put, if they're doing stations, they may have 5 or 6 clips at each station too, and that's 15 different checklists that they have to submit.
Yeah. Ms. Sale, how are you today?
I'm good.
I just want to give you a chance to introduce
Thank you
yourself
so-
as well.
I'm so sorry, I left school.
You're good.
I was not expecting the traffic. My name is Madam Sale. I'm the teacher of the year of the district. And this is my first meeting. And thank you.
We are very
I
glad to have you
appreciate
here.
it. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
And
Well, you
we're
have
talking
you
about
have a packet in front of you of
Yes, I
3,200.
have one.
Yeah, but we're particularly now talking about the quality review checklist and the feasibility.
Okay.
And then we have one other person who joined us. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was out of school. My name's Maureen Hill, and I am the elementary literacy curriculum specialist.
Are there other things from doing this, obviously very short comparison, but things that jumped out to anybody from committee members who want to share their things they liked, questions they had?
Just in reference to the objectives that you mentioned, in our policy, they're objectives for selection of supplementary materials, and in this other one, they're all materials. When I think about our policy and when I read through it, I feel like it was created definitely with a library lens. I mean, I know it addresses other things, but there's so many things in our policy that feel very library specific and don't necessarily address beyond the library. Whereas this other policy, the way it's divided with the core instructional materials, supplemental instructional materials, and media collections, it's a little more
The easier read too.
Yeah, that was my thoughts as well, because we gave such little space, airtime to the materials brought in by teachers versus the everything else, because I was reading this kind of as the lens of the library or the curriculum that the curriculum department goes out and looks at, and then the board approves. But back to the objectives again, so the other differences that I saw in letter F versus number 4 were number 4 in Cabarrus County, it says to provide materials resources. I didn't know if that was just a repeat. Why do we have to have 2? And then the last word in there says, without promoting teachers' personal, political, or religious views. We don't have that in there at all. So, and then the other one was, along the same lines, it was number 5 in the one, and it had the material and the resources. And then it was number 6 versus letter F, where we talked about, they don't have anything in number 6 that talks about teachers' opinions, but in our letter F, we do say to place principle above personal opinion and reason above prejudice in the selection of materials. So I think we're saying the same thing, we're just calling it out in different words, in different objectives.
I will say though that our number 6, their number 6, I apologize, with the select materials of the highest quality to ensure a comprehensive collection, I do like that highest quality. Like there are, so I'll go back to our math adoption, right? Like we check sources to make sure the quality is of utmost quality. And so when we do that at the district level, we definitely want teachers to be doing that for the things they're bringing in too. And so I like that it notes about like the quality of the material, something that's published from a reputable author versus something that's self-published or like I don't know, I think it helps teachers and they're professionals, they can distinguish.
But our letter F does have highest quality also in it. A call to your attention. The material of the highest quality, so we're saying the same thing, just in different order. So you missed it completely in ours, and we're saying the exact same thing. So these are really very similar and almost the same, just wordsmithing, other than the checklist.
Right. I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is one of the places that seems very library specific because that's what, it is a library collection. I don't know that we talk about instructional materials as a collection the way this is. It doesn't, I don't know. This just, both of those, all of that feels very library and not beyond.
I'd like to throw something radical out there.
Sure.
What if we separated library, figured that out, separated supplemental materials for the classroom out? Because it seems like there's an overlap there, and it's just too hard to do this one catch-all form, policy, whatever, to do both. And I've had this feeling for the last couple of weeks that they needed to be separate. And then what you're saying could then be tailored to what you're doing.
I don't know, when you select, I feel like we kind of all use the same, we've all been using the same policy to guide selection. I think we
kind of need to grow though.
I think to stay in line with the rest of the state, and I think it's done for a reason. I think there are components that maybe we tailor and wordsmith and make it clear, maybe like the Ferris. But when you say separate, are you thinking for our mind and our brain right now thinking, or separate the policies?
Just the procedure. This is how you do it if it's a book in the library or the library collection or your collection on your bookshelf, maybe, I don't know. But for teaching, make it just specific for teaching.
I think you could still keep it under 3,200, but like how they have responsibility, like district materials, school materials, and then you could have a library material, like
media collection.
Maybe keep it in 3,200, but have
I think it could all be one, but I think our policy could have some clearer headings.
and more consistent, because they kind of switch back and forth between their wording as well.
We have another comment right here.
I think the thing related to that I really liked looking at Cabarrus's policy is how they did break it down. They made it much more clear, and I feel like that's something that we could add to ours that would provide more clarity for our staff, for our parents, for everybody involved. I think that adding more detail is gonna help, adding those definitions, adding the specifics.
I agree, and really, a lot of what they did it was just with their headings. Like it didn't add a lot more words.
It's more text structure than anything else that makes this an easier read.
It is a much easier.
Well, I will tell you from our conversations with the curriculum champions and with my team, I think if we worked on this policy a little bit and had had some clear language there, we could potentially move towards other districts, and I don't know that even a checklist, I don't know if that's something that needs to be totally separate, or is even needed at all potentially.
We can always too, there are like 53 or maybe it's even higher than that, maybe in the 80s, counties that use the NCSBA as their source. And you can look on Simbly, any one of the districts, and you can go straight to this policy.
And they all look pretty similar.
And they all look
look
very similar because they're using the template from the NCSBA.
Yeah. It's a very good point. And they all look very similar. And one reason that I think Cabarrus, like I said, I got this from my Job Alike group. I think one reason why we lifted it up is because of the headings, the structure, because what they say is very, very close. So I don't think it's a lot of difference in what we say. Maybe a couple, we need to add the controversial things in there. I think that's a good.
We talked about.
I don't think it's a lot of difference.
Because they say it too, both of them say controversial.
do ours say that too?
Yeah, ours does.
Okay.
Yeah,
But we
talked about.
Theirs is number 4.
We want to add, Ms. Bradford, what we were talking about.
I
but we
can't
gotta
find
edit.
my note on that.
I
Oh, here
left
it
my
is,
notes-
right
I
here,
left my
right
notes in my
here. We
office.
talked about there are 5 or 6 controversial topics, because really, this came about because we had a problem in what people deemed controversial topic. It wasn't all the topics, it was controversial. And so I'm thinking, we're talking about what other districts do, but right now, we're at the tip of the spear on this thing for the whole state. I'm not aware of another book review fun event that anyone else has had in the state besides us. I'm sure there have been maybe, but, so everyone else is trying to now get a grip on this so we don't ever have to do that again. That's the goal for me, is I don't want to have to do that. So we were talking, and, sexuality, gender, politics is mentioned, so you don't have to put politics, it's already there. Racism, and then religion is mentioned, but we talk about social justice, which is again, is a fairly broad category, but if it was listed there, then you would say, okay, if it has to do with sexuality, gender, racism, political, religious, or social justice, then this is what you got to do. But the rest of it's probably okay. I mean, I'm just being facetious here, but that's kind of what, I don't know, but it needs to be spelled out for those controversial topics. It needs to be mentioned and spelled out so that if a teacher, part of me says, why do you want to bring a controversial topic into the classroom quickly? Why do we have to go through that? But we have to, maybe. It's complex, so we have to have the groundwork so that if a teacher wants to do it, they have clear guidelines on how to do it, so we don't end up in a complaint and appeal in a week-long hearing.
Well, and I think to Ms. Meehan's point, in order to teach some of the critical thinking skills, sometimes you do want to use a relevant current event.
Right.
Right? Or you want to do something that's meaningful to students or things like that. So I think there are cases where in order to reach a standard, particularly around inquiry, critical thinking, some of those standards, social studies, there are going to be times where a controversial topic is talked about because
you can't teach it.
That's how you address a standard.
And it's important.
It's not the everyday, so it's a small portion of what you're teaching, right?
I agree.
So then they would have to have whatever replaces the checklist, unless we keep the checklist and remodel it, and these other guidelines. But the rest of the time, everyone's going to be able to operate.
So as a team that will be trying to figure out the guidelines, so what kind of guidelines, when you say guidelines, what are we thinking?
Boundaries, lanes.
So what do we, because this is where we get, and that's the reason why people are, it's like, I think about the checklist, and it's like we're trying to cover all these things, and it's really hard. So I'm not saying, what are we thinking when we say guidelines? What would we write?
I'm looking at the one from Cabarrus, and they said, objectives for selection of instructional materials. Provide material resources representative of many religious, ethnic, cultural groups from our nation. And, any of those things could be considered controversial.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, earlier this week, a teacher came and was trying to be proactive about a situation and knows that a family may not want their child to talk about religion, but that's a part of the curriculum in world history. It's a part of the curriculum in our history classes. And it's mandated, that
Standard.
we teach about the Holocaust and those things. And that's not solely religious, but it's touched. And so, yeah, I know that we can make a list of things you can't, but I don't know that you're going to be able to do that. Because it's going to wind up being controversial the way that it's presented. But we've got to be able to talk about these things and have educational conversations about it. It does need to be unbiased, and it needs to be, but we've got to be able to talk about those things. I don't know that you're going to get away from having those controversies. It's going to be hard.
And I think we want students to learn to talk about those things under the guidance of professionals who know how to facilitate conversations and guide the discourse. Exactly.
Respectful discourse, yeah.
And so
This is about the supplemental materials that are used to teach. That's what all this is trying to set a guideline for.
Well, this is actually all instructional materials.
Yeah, true.
But the other thing about the Cabarrus one is it says various points of view. So if there is a controversial topic that's being taught or addressed, or especially in social studies, that we're not providing just one perspective, that it is, I think that's the way to handle controversial topics, is making sure that, that inquiry model, and you're providing multiple perspectives and multiple points of view.
But see, that's why I like that it continuously saying goes back to the principal, right? Because when the principal, like when that teacher brings you something, then you can talk and have those conversations. Okay, you're talking about this. Where are we going to get the other things? Because if we just do a checklist or we just do something, how does that get? I mean, how do you get that? Right. And so that's why I love the fact that they hold the principal accountable, because the principal can dig deeper and really figure out what's going on. And then too, I hate to say it, but, well, not I hate to say it, but you know the teachers in your building, right? And you can really look at, you can really help guide teachers more than we could have this bird's eye view or just honing in on one thing.
Well, and I think also the cultures of our school. I think the schools in this district, depending on your geographic location, there are vastly different populations and cultures in each building. And there are things that might not be appropriate at my school, but then are very relevant and appropriate at other schools.
Yeah.
Freeman. Yeah.
And who's to define controversial? Because what's controversial to me may not be controversial to you. And I worry that if we try to start listing out all the things we can and cannot do, then we're really just playing the I gotcha game with our teachers and our principals, for that. And we're censoring information from our students. And how do we develop critical thinking skills and ways to go? If you don't like it, let me show you where there's some other resources that you can read more about. Or you can send things home with the parents. We're talking about this. Do you have any suggestions? Because you know your parents and you know your community. But I would be really opposed, and but it's up to the curriculum people. But when we start listing out the things we can and cannot do, then we start to really tie our hands, hamstring ourselves, and we could even be getting away from the standard course of study. Because how else are you going to teach it? So whoever brought that point up, that's a good point.
Can I push back a little bit? So I don't know that it's about like what you can and can't do, but I do think something that I appreciate in their policy is the clear definition. And I do think helping to define for teachers, here are things that we know get more pushback than others. Like, I do think teachers like when our policies sort of clearly lay out boundaries for, boundaries maybe not the right word, but like.
Lanes?
Yeah.
So how do you lay that out? How do you lay out? How do you do that?
We're in their policies.
Like, so for example, religion is listed on here a lot, right? And so I think teachers are hesitant to talk about religion because they know that it's a topic that can be.
It's pretty hot button.
Can be hot button and tumultuous, right? But in order to meet some of the standards, they have to do it. So I think sort of listing out for them, like, we acknowledge that this might, like, we acknowledge that these things might get pushback. So here's why here's, you know, the process we need you to follow. I don't know.
Yeah, and the
I
reason
feel like
I
it
say
does
that,
make sense.
yeah, and the reason that I say that and I push back is you and I will be trying to figure it out. And I mean, right now, what would we put that says this is what you do?
But I think the process is: are you talking to your principal? Are you bringing in balance or like?
But that's the guidelines, though, right? That's the whole policy. The principal is involved in this whole policy. So I just wonder if we're trying to create something where teachers are feeling like they have to, okay, did I do this? Because the whole policy says that you have to bring in materials that do certain things. So trying to list it and say, when you're doing religion, you do this, I just think we're going to get into ourselves and we're going to forget
And you should be
something.
doing those things no matter what you're bringing in.
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's why I would push back on that. It just scares me to think that we're going to put something out there in front of teachers that we're going to miss something, and then how do we do that in the standard? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading you wrong. I just don't want to put something out there and we try to figure out everything that somebody's going to think or say on it.
You can't.
I know. I don't know
What's
what.
controversial today might not
That's-
be,
yeah.
you know, in what comes up. One thing I do like is, and this is in both, but where it says principals are encouraged to involve teachers in establishing these rules or this oversight. You know, we spoke before, my school is very small, in elementary school. A principal might be able to get to some of those. Phil, I'm sure you can't necessarily see everything. So to have have a department chair, let's say, be part of that, because you also want, as the department, what ends up being really positive and dynamic in one class, you want to make sure maybe this is a resource for other classes. I like that that's in there, maybe to be even a little more clear that, a department chair would be included in this process.
And also, too, if you notice in Cabarrus County, they don't list out things. They are very generic about, they don't do the list either. So if we're really modeling them and we hold them high, then,
Well, I don't want to say I want to model them and I hold them high. I will tell you that basically everybody across the state is the same. I don't think anybody missed out anything, but I like the way their text is structured, the structure of
No, I don't mind that, but I'm just saying, they don't list. So, why should we feel compelled to list?
Ms. Bradford, you were going to say something earlier.
Just looking anymore, I have to look and see when something was created. Looks like this version was created August 8th. It says temporary behind that, and then November 1 of last year. So it was updated right out a year ago. So we have to think, what's happened in the world since then? Well, we had a hearing on the book stamped here. The checklist that we have, if I understand it from y'all, was created as a, pardon the expression, knee-jerk to something that had happened in the district. So here we are, something's happened in the district. We don't want a knee-jerk, but we want to make it to where we go into the future. We can't look at how things were done anywhere, because we're in cutting-edge territory now for the whole state, really. And they'll be looking to us to say, how did they handle it after that hearing? How did they handle it? The checklist was discussed ad nauseum. This was discussed ad nauseum. So how did they grow from it? And that, I hope, is our goal here.
Well, maybe that can kind of take us into, if we do feel like a checklist is needed, which I think we can probably cover what's in the checklist by having it in policy, but we did
Can I ask, before we move on there, because when we look at, what are the things that we want to make sure, before we move from policy, right? What are some things that we want to make sure that we love the text structure for Cabarrus, okay? What are some of those other things that we need to make sure we keep or redefined in ours?
I like the responsibility section.
I'd consider taking theirs as a template and adding everything in ours, rather than go that way. I'd go it the other way.
Okay, so is there anything from ours that we would want to put in?
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good, I mean, I have no problem with that.
And is there anything in theirs that we don't want? That would be easier to say, because it was just such an easier, I just understood it after I read it.
I mean, it's a very easy read.
I feel like the Media and Technology Committee is minimized in Cabarrus's,
Okay.
Okay?
whereas we've relied on that for many
Okay.
years.
So what I would
Do they
do
even have
is,
one?
I would
Did you
share
check?
this with you and you
In
could.
Cabarrus? I mean, they use wording like, they say Media Advisory Committee, Supplemental Instructional Materials Committee / Media Advisory Committee. I guess maybe they just don't call it the same thing.
Yeah,
They-
maybe not.
But I also don't necessarily think that reviewing supplementary instructional materials falls under MTAC.
Depends on how you define supplementary.
Right.
Instructional, I would agree.
Right.
Right. In our policy, though, they're all kind of mixed together.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to, and we'll definitely get with you on that. Anything else that you want to make sure, if we were to take this and just say, put New Hanover everywhere that you have Cabarrus, anything else, that would be so much easier for me.
We would really have to take a microscope and,
I mean, I know we're gonna-
look at what
yeah.
ours has that they don't have that we want to keep, like,
If you don't, yeah,
she just mentioned that. And really, I wrote down, we really have 3 things we have to look at: library, instructional, and supplemental, right?
yeah, they have that in here. That's what they
So,
have.
but maybe they have their own little headings, so.
But is
I'm just
supplemental
gonna-
instructional the same thing?
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say
supplemental
the same thing.
instructional.
Are the same
But they
thing.
have core instruction.
They do
That's
theirs
what
as
we
core
provide in
instruction.
district,
Yeah.
right?
So
And
core
then
instruction,
supplemental is
supplemental.
what, yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like there's 3 different things that have to be dealt with, and the more it's broken down with headings,
The easy.
I don't know.
But then they
Dr.
also have
Wald and
district-wide
Dr. Faison,
One
what do you
thing
school
that's-
say?
level.
One thing that's in neither of them, but is maybe worth noting, is like the state does, so a lot of resources now have an online component, and the state has a form that they have to follow, and so I don't know if that's worth putting in here, or at least like referencing it somehow, that like, you also have to follow, if it doesn't follow the state guidelines.
So do we need to have something about digital materials? Because that's where
And now,
MTAC
and now that
falls.
we're one
Their
to one in our
E
middle schools
sort
and
of
high
has
schools.
that.
Sorry, say that again?
Their letter
make
E
sure we
sort of has that. It doesn't reference the state policy.
Their letter E.
Yeah, because think about it, 2 years from
page at the
now,
very
digital's
top.
gonna be far more important.
Yeah, I
than
think they
it is now.
have digital resources.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, but, I mean.
I can't find it.
It's
But you're saying
Yeah,
supplemental.
I'm saying to be proactive, if we just say, like, it must meet the state
Yeah, but it
standards.
doesn't say anything.
Because the
And
state,
that way, if the state changes their standards, it's
Right.
already in our policy.
right, because that whole
Put the
approval
cross-references
process
in here.
for digital resources, which are often supplemental.
Right, right.
But they are also core sometimes, and they still have to go through the
Right,
state
right,
process.
right. I agree with you. I almost feel like there needs to be like a separate.
Well, and I think if we're looking for this policy to be 10 years in the future, like, you know what I mean? Things are gonna be,
Maybe 4.
it's very hard to find a resource that does not also have a digital component.
We already have it, we already have it in ours, so we could just put it in, and we can do that.
Backwards on that.
Have you guys, in your preparation for this, you and Dr. Faison and the folks that interact with our teachers, especially our secondary teachers, have they had a chance to weigh in at all on their thoughts on, because I'm hearing that a lot of them feel like they're about to be micromanaged out of the classroom. And so I would be hesitant for us, I mean, as you guys talk about this, to make sure that teachers have had a chance to look at our policy and compare with others and just offer their opinion on.
You want to share?
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
do one of you want to?
So you want to share what the teacher's feedback was? The teacher's biggest concern was the checklist.
Okay.
That's their
I
biggest
can see that.
concern, so you want to share
I was
some
going to say, do you want to, you were
Oh,
running the
hold on,
curriculum,
we got a
Tim.
teacher here.
Yeah, I would like to add about having a checklist. It's just going to be a little bit inflammatory for the teacher and for the students. Because having like, as we said earlier, what's controversial for you may not be controversial for another student. And I'm sure the teacher will not put their bias if we are looking to prepare students to be global competent, having critical thinking skills, and especially at the high school that they are graduating. So I see that we can allow this discussion in the classroom. We're talking about religion. We're not going to influence the students to adopt or have any view that it's based on us. But having those skills, inquiry, inform, discuss, and compete in a debate, those things, they should learn it. This is my position as a teacher, and I believe the teacher, they need to have their input in order, like for this.
Well, they did, and she can share with, somebody's gonna pull it up. We met with about 30 teachers, and they have, definitely have some say about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, wait a minute, were you in favor of the checklist or not in favor?
No, I'm not in favor for the checklist. I teach French, by the way, and I go by the standard of North Carolina standard. We fixed our curriculum from New Hanover, and we teach one of the standards that students need to compare the target language to their culture. So from here, to my understanding, am I able not to discuss anything about religious, or should I just take the topic to the principal at each time I'm teaching, hitting the standard? Is that how this checklist will work?
What do y'all think?
It was more when you were using supplemental materials
Everything she
or
has is
resources.
She's French.
I teach an
Everything
elective,
she has is
and I have everything, I build it on my
Yeah.
own.
Right, I'm just saying, if a conversation you were gonna have a conversation, I think that's a different category. It's,
Well, let me
I
have,
can-
can you guys see, what were you thinking, board members, what were you thinking about that? I think that's a good question for you guys.
What were you thinking about, what?
She's asking.
I will say it another, rephrase it. So I'm teaching, and my North Carolina standards, course of study, one standard says the students need to be able to compare the target language culture to their own culture.
Okay.
I have a variety of students from various backgrounds. I have kids from Egypt, kids from Hispanics. I have all backgrounds. How do I navigate this? If I'm having a checklist that I cannot discuss a specific controversial subject or issue, I cannot compare what happened, for example, in a Francophone world country to what's happening here in the United States. Example, let's take just the Second World War. I talk about France and what happened to France, and here we go to compare it to our target, the cultural target of United States, and we just like sit down and we discuss the Second World War, the Holocaust. But I have students that they don't want to talk about the Holocaust. So what should I do here? Like just not teach it, or should I give them, I go back to the list and just go to the principal to approve if I find another subject for them? How can we navigate it as teachers? Well, we have a lot of stuff to hit. We have standards to hit. We want to make sure that our students are able to have these critical thinking skills. So how can I do it and apply? This is just, I'm an elective. How it's going to be in a core study and a world history study.
Yeah, we've just heard that to talk about the Holocaust is a part of the standards, correct? So it has to be talked about. How do y'all dance around that? I don't know. I'd love to come and understand it. I didn't realize the Holocaust was quite as controversial as y'all were saying it is.
See the
There are some
Yes,
some
it's very-
students
it's
that
very-
don't want to
I
talk
should
about
say
it.
it, or you remind me. It wasn't what I thought of.
I guess the question that I hear her saying,
But
I
the
think Mr.
checklist
Sutton,
says
the
you can't
checklist.
teach this.
I think the question she's saying is, everything, think about everything she pulls in, everything an English 11, 12 pull in is supplemental, because we don't have a core. I mean, and that is probably the majority of the teachers in high school. So do they do this every time they're teaching is the question she has. Every day, everything she teaches is supplementary.
but isn't it like picked out before you start teaching? A lot of it?
So-
Percentage of it?
So this was a big, so we met with the curriculum champions, the teachers, and this was a big topic of discussion, especially among our secondary colleagues, in that, you know, so when you're an elective, when we don't give you a curriculum and then everything is considered supplementary. So then does every lesson then have to be, and every resource that you pull from need to be approved by your administrator before you teach? And one of the things, we were talking to an economics teacher, a personal finance teacher, and she said, some days I teach a lesson and I realize that I need to connect with them, and so I want to pull an article from CNBC. Would that if I change my strategy the night before, because we also want to be responsive to our kids and be reflective and try to connect with them and see what they need, would she then need to take that article from CNBC and have that approved using the quality review checklist? And I think that was a major concern on their time. If they're not handed a curriculum, even if you are handed a curriculum, I think about right now with Wit and Wisdom, it's a knowledge building curriculum. And right now we're assuming that our students have a lot of knowledge on some things that they haven't encountered yet. And so sometimes our teachers need to supplement that knowledge. So in 4th grade, when they're learning about the American Revolution, but in 2nd grade they didn't get that part about America then and now, there's a connection that teacher's going to need to make. And so they might need to pull in another piece of text, or they might need to pull in a video to spark that knowledge and to give them that knowledge. And so teachers are often doing that on the fly, because in the moment they're realizing their kids don't have that. So I think there's a concern and a worry, because our teachers also want to follow the rules and follow the policy, that they're going against the rules in that moment. And so are we not able to make those choices in the moment because it has to be approved before we introduce it? And then what burden does that put on our teachers in their time? Because that was the other concern that came up. If I'm spending all my time completing a quality review checklist, that's going to take away some of my time from giving feedback in my grading, or to have thoughtful planning, because I'm needing to make sure that I comply with the policy.
Well, the way you said that, there's only like 10 or less things on the quality checklist, so it's unless it's a hot button topic. And I would think if it was a hot button topic, there needs to be some boundary, some oversight somewhere until we get through this phase that we're in right now, to where there's some boundary there if it's a hot button topic. Does that not seem reasonable?
Can I ask a question, and I apologize, it could be because I was running a little late.
Will you introduce yourself first as well?
I'm sorry?
Will you introduce yourself as well?
Hello, Jen Boer, NTSS. Who determines what the hot button topics are? And how, like, what if I didn't realize, what if I'm a classroom teacher and I didn't realize, like, I was just being responsive to my students in that moment, and what I realized they didn't know, and I thought I was doing the right thing by being responsive, and then I find out I did a hot button topic. Like, what if I didn't know? Or are we gonna have a list of hot buttons?
But I think to me, that's why the checklist doesn't really get to that. Like,
Right.
that's why I feel like it could just exist in the wording of selection of materials, whether that is selected at the beginning of the semester or whether you're selecting something in the right now as a professional, right? You're hopefully using your
Right.
you know, wherewithal to choose something that's appropriate for the moment. But I guess that to me is sort of like, the checklist could never cover all of that, to your point. But I think you could word the policy about all the resources that you bring in that potentially could cover more than a check.
So I think the question is, does this body think a checklist is needed? I think that's the question. And if so, what does it look like?
And we did get feedback, you know, and so there their
I would love to
feedback.
hear that question of, does this body think that? I think it's important for the board members to hear whatever you think. I don't know. I mean, I haven't asked you that question before. Do you think a checklist is needed? And then we could talk about what should it look like.
I don't think a checklist is needed. I think guiding questions are helpful, just for teachers or whomever to make sure that they're thinking about all the things that they may need to think about, but I don't think a checklist is necessary.
Yeah, I think if there's clarity in the policy, right, and then our building leaders, our administrators know that, to me, then that's more a conversation that needs to happen in our PLCs. I'm getting ready to teach this topic. I need to talk through this because so much of this is nuanced, right? About the learners in your classroom, the materials that you're using. And so to me, that's more of that conversation that's happening in PLCs, or that's part of our PLC agenda. Okay, are we bringing supplemental materials in this week? What are they, and why are we choosing to bring those in?
And if there are those topics that come up just in conversation, you of course want to make your lessons engaging, and you want to allow your students to make connections by supplementing, and it may be on the spot, but just perhaps at staff meetings or PLCs, just going over those, what should we think about? Make sure we're giving multiple perspectives. Make sure we're aware of, the need, not only the needs, but the backgrounds of the students in our classrooms.
The principals or teachers would love to hear from you.
I really like your point about taking consideration the background and to add to the topic or issues. In this case, we're going to end up having a list of topics, the hot button topics. Our county is changing. We have a lot of students, diverse, and we have a lot of refugees, especially from Afghanistan. I will give you just a simple example. 9/11, for an American, is a proud moment. For an Afghan, is not a proud moment to talk about. Go about this, having this checklist, parent maybe advocating for their kid to not talk about this hot topic for them. Are we going about what we want for students in the classroom, or are we gonna open other doors where everybody will ask what are their hot topics? We're gonna have this checklist, but at the end it will come up to a specific topics. But take in consideration that we have a variety of students with all different backgrounds. That list will not just be 1, 2, 3, 4.
And I think that's why it's important at the site level, at the school level, to have those discussions, because even in our staff, there's lots of different backgrounds that are coming, and becoming more aware ourselves as educators as to, what may be sensitive to someone else.
But if we're gonna take, that path about sensitivity for students, we want them to have this conversation. We want them to have skills in talking. They're gonna grow up and go in the world. They're not gonna say, I can't talk about that. I've never known how to discuss that issue. Our role is to prepare them for the future. My role in my classroom is to teach them how to discuss, how to debate, how to respect other people's opinion. We're not talking about feeling. I'm not sitting in my classroom to discuss my feeling about a subject. They should be non-subjective, it should be objective opinion in a classroom. So that's my take in this specific. By ending up having a checklist, it will not just have 1 or 2 major topics. And I think at the end we need to define those topics if we're gonna tackle them and you want this checklist. But I see it that it can't happen because you have other topics. We have major people, a lot of people from different backgrounds. Are we going to put everybody's hot topic? We can't.
I would love to hear from the principals, how would you handle this?
I would agree, I like what you said about, sensitive, and, I'm thinking about complex. If you almost put those words instead of controversial, it sounds for a teacher a little like, I'm happy to, discuss a sensitive or complex topic, but controversy, I'm gonna stay away from that.
I
So,
like that, yeah.
So maybe some language there. But, I do think there needs to be, some avenue for oversight and discussion within, I mentioned before, whether that's with a principal, assistant principal, within a department. I think that's certainly important. I don't think we can define everything, in any way, but I do think, having something, that says, for complex and sensitive topics, teachers are encouraged, so-and-so to speak to, or discuss with their leadership team or.
Do you not think that's in here? I'm just asking. Do you think that's in the policy, or you think it's something different than the policy?
I like that it was in, as far as where it talked about the principal is encouraged to include the teachers as part of that team, and that language speaks to the principal. I'm wondering what language speaks, I don't know if it's in there,
Right.
it speaks to the teacher.
Did you have a feeling of yes or no on the checklist?
I don't like the idea of the checklist.
Okay.
In the Senate, I think I like Ms. May's, there needs to be some guiding questions that lead a group to discuss, is this appropriate or not? I've had multiple situations over the course of the last year where we didn't think about, how would this student and this family view this video that I'm showing? And I think after the conversation with the teacher about it, I didn't really think about that. I didn't think about how this is coming across to this family. And so I think if you have some of those questions, then you're able to think about that before you get into it. Because some of these, the checklist, I'm just looking at it from my own perspective. Yep, it's good, no problem, because that's exactly in the situation I've been in, that's the way the teacher was thinking about it. And they hadn't considered that other side. And I think we got to have some kind of conversation about that other side, about, how is this going to impact.
So, and I like the way the guiding questions, because to me, the guiding questions they're not one more thing for our teachers to do or our principals to do. Because, when I think about the checklist and I think about a high school principal trying to manage a checklist, it's unreal. I mean, it's not gonna happen. I mean, you and I both know that there's no way a high school principal and a teacher could do that for even if they sat and did that all day long, it couldn't happen.
Well, we tried to do that. Right before COVID, we had a pretty big situation that we had to deal with.
Right.
And we reacted to it and said, you can't use anything from online, and so it was, but I don't know that we really had some of those guiding questions to really get to the heart of.
No, that's what I'm saying. But so I was saying, I agree with the guiding questions, right? So looking at, if I could bring your attention, because I want to make sure, because we're going to have to be, I'm going to be tasked to figure something out from all this. I want to make sure I get a couple things from you. Could you look at the new, I'm going to say, questions, not the checklist, the per policy 32 at the 100, quality, the one with red.
Can I ask a question first? Okay, I'm teaching, I fill this sucker out. I got some yeses, I got some nos. Then what happens to it?
So that comes to the leadership team, whoever's on that leadership team, or MTAC, and then we review it and decide whether that resource would be approved or not in advance of it being used in the classroom.
So the checklist has to be reviewed
Prior to.
Either at the once a month committee level or the leadership level in the particular department or school.
Really, it would be according to the policy, it would be by the committee that is assigned to review the supplementary material, but it's impossible to, you'd literally have to have a meeting probably every day if it were really being followed.
So technically, we haven't really been using it.
No, no. There's no, I mean, because the feasibility in it, that's all, that would be, if we did it to that degree, really this would be what somebody does all day long.
Because there's 12 things on this one, and as much as everyone doesn't like this one, it does address under accurate A, underneath the blue line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Does the task contain material that might be considered inflammatory? There's a good word. Controversial, demeaning, offensive, or emotionally charged for particular subgroups. That's kind of what y'all have been talking about
Yeah.
here today.
Yeah.
So that to me seems like a great question. Is it free of stereotypes? Just above it, accurate. Is it free of stereotypes? There should not be any elements of the task that could be considered to reflect a stereotypical view or offensive to a subgroup. I think the parent mentioned that one about 16 times in her presentation. Does the task depict members of particular subgroups in stereotypical portrayals, occupations, situations, or having certain attitudes, interests, or personal traits? So some of this isn't all that bad. 12 things is too much, no question about it. Even if it's just what'd you call it, guidelines or questions within the text.
I would say.
This one is only 5.
I would say we talked about those things, and I would take you back to Mrs. Small's comment, what's controversial? What's
Yeah.
offensive? I mean.
No, I'm
who's
just saying you
who's-
have to
no,
keep
I'm just
that
saying
word,
though-
but-
No, I'm just saying though, those questions, who decides that? The principal?
But is the purpose of the checklist, the quality checklist, to avoid controversial topics? Or is it to make sure that the materials we're using are aligned to the standards?
Aligned
You
to
know,
the
what is the,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
the,
And kind
so.
of vetted, so somebody in the food chain is in the chain of command has said, yeah, this is okay, so you don't hang a teacher out there to dry. But, you had mentioned sensitive and complex versus controversial. Those are great words. I don't think, I mean, sensitive and complex are not that arbitrary.
Okay.
Where controversial is now, right now.
So let me ask this question of Mr. Sutton. I want you to ask this question and explain to the board members this. You have, I would say, I don't know how many subject areas you have in that building. Of those subject areas, you probably have 3 to 5 district core materials, and even they bring in supplemental materials. Your teachers are planning for that weekly, correct?
Right.
If you are to use this, if he's to use this with the supplemental material of the, how many teachers do you have?
We've got 95.
Okay, so let's say 60 of them a week will be using something that they have to pull in. That's a low number. We both know that. Most teachers pull in more. How do you do that? How would you manage that?
No, I mean, it's got to be within the PLC.
So then a teacher can't change they can't, I've got to teach the same thing and I can't change what I teach on the fly.
Right.
That's a challenge. I mean,
I'm just speaking for teachers because I know what they said and Ms. Hill has shared, and we are, as the academic officer, we are asking our teachers to reach students. And I don't want to put anything, because let's be honest, if teachers are scared or can't do this, they're just gonna do something that is not
Mediocre.
I mean, it's not gonna be as good as it might could have been.
Less effective, less impactful.
You know, just thinking from a teacher's perspective, I think if there's clarity in the policy, right, about what the district expects about the materials that we use, and then there's guiding questions
Right.
that guide my decision-making tree, right? Like I'm choosing something, and like Mr. Sutton said, I have my own perspective, but I'm not maybe thinking about all my family's perspectives and backgrounds as I plan that lesson. But if I have those questions in mind, that might make me think twice about something and might make me just be more thoughtful in my planning process. And so I do like the idea of guiding questions, leading me through. And then I think as an administrator, you have those same guiding questions if you had to go and talk to someone about a supplemental material. Well, tell me why you utilize that. And let's think about the questions that we all consider when we choose supplemental materials. That also gives you a starting point in that conversation, and for that teacher to share their thought process and their professional opinion. Because that was the other thing that we heard from that committee was they want their professional opinion to be honored. And they feel sometimes that going through this checklist, their professional opinion is not being considered when they choose those materials.
And to take it and connect it even further is do everything you said. We have the policy that's well-written, the guiding questions that we are thinking through, but also when we are gathered in PLCs, we are continually talking about those guiding questions and saying, is anybody bringing supplemental materials? Have you thought through these questions? Like bringing it up so it's not like, oh yeah, we have that, but oh, it is a part of our conversation. It's part of our practice to reflect on what we're doing. Knowing that there may be times where teachers are being responsive the next day, but hopefully what we're doing is ingraining in them those questions and that thought process before they do that.
And using those guiding questions, you're also opening yourself up as an educator to making sure that you're bringing in multiple perspectives, making sure, not only, oh, I shouldn't teach this, but if I'm going to teach this, I want to make sure that all points of views are covered.
And I think to that point, sometimes one material is not going to have all points of view, right? But if I know if I'm teaching this critical thinking standard or we've got this inquiry, like I can bring in these things side by side.
Correct.
Because one resource doesn't always be.
I liken it to, if we have a tool, we should have a tool that we can use to help us be better, not a tool that uses us, that directs. And so when I was thinking in that light, let's say I do check a no, or I do check a yes, whichever is the wrong one, or the one that would cause us to think. Does that mean, I'm not a proponent of the checklist, but the guiding questions. But let's suppose that my answer is a yes when some people think it should be a no, as an example. Does that mean that my material gets thrown out completely, or does it mean that we just need to talk through it more? So I'm thinking that our guiding questions should be just that and not a hard, fast yes or no. And then as you're talking through, I lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think questions to consider, things to think about.
Oh, I remembered. Do we want the guiding principles as part, the guiding questions as part of our policy, or do we want them as a procedure that supports our policy? Because the more you write in policy, you are stuck hard and fast. And we have many policies that it's up to the school district to decide the procedure, the superintendent and his people decide what the procedures look like. So, I would encourage you guys to think about what you think necessarily needs to be codified. This is the law versus procedures that help us do our jobs better, that we can change on the fly if they do not work. Like, you don't need board approval I'm saying, do we need board approval for you guys to choose supplemental materials, or should that be more of a school district management thing and not a board governance thing?
Because we have 15 minutes, I want to say a couple things because I want to pick your brains about the guiding questions. I think this whole table I think we're all on the same page that to give the guiding questions to teachers something to think about and to protect them a little bit more is a good thing, right? I think I didn't hear from you guys. What do you, Ms.
I think it's great. The clarity in policy.
Yeah,
I'm taking notes, so.
Yeah.
Clarity in policy and having those guiding questions.
Right.
And I know that someone around here said that oversight's necessary, so involving the principals, I think all of that's right, yeah.
So one of the things, and I would love to hear what some people are thinking some of the guiding questions might be, because we don't want too many. You had too many that just, but one of the things that I'm thinking, I go back to the controversy and the hot buttons, because I want us to protect teachers, and I want to make sure that parents know that we're doing what's best. And this is not the perfect question, but I was thinking one of the questions might be, is this material complex and or may others see it as controversial? And if the answer is yes, is this the best or necessary is this material necessary to teach the standard or something to that nature? Because at times it's going to be that way. So that is what I'm thinking, very broad questions that make people think. If you're bringing in something controversial, why? Because that's what we tell, that's what we ask. I mean, because some things you know are going to be, when I say controversial, I'm not talking about, yeah, and I'm not talking about things like the Holocaust, and I'm not talking about that. I'm thinking about if there's another way to teach something, and that standard is just says you have different ways, ask yourself, why did I choose this material? Right? And a lot of teachers most of the time, they have very good reasons why they chose that material. And if you can back that up, then that's just a conversation you're prepared to have with the parents or the principal. So I think that's what we need to do is set those guiding questions to make people just kind of stop and think before you bring in this book or this video or this. And I would love to hear what are some other thoughts or type of questions that people would think that would go there. Yeah.
Well, I agree with what you just said, and it starts within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking that, does this bring up any feelings within me?
Mm-hmm.
And, what does that stem from? Because if you don't recognize that in yourself, you can get caught in a situation where you're thinking, oh, that wasn't what I should have done, or, that wasn't what I intended. So it needs to start with some self-reflection.
Can you just restate what you said? Because I was trying to write it down.
Well, and it's not the perfect question, but it's what we say to teachers now, right? Is this material, is it complex or controversial, and may others see it, or may others see it to that nature? And if yes, is this necessary to get the point across? Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of times it's going to be yes, and then it might be, how are you being proactive to educate parents and students or whatever, right?
Well, I think the other side of that, though, is if it may be controversial or complex or whatever, are you providing more than one perspective? I think that's the other side of that question.
Good point. Very good point. How are you being proactive, and how are you providing more than one perspective? Love it. Anything else? This is what I need. This is what we need. Any other guiding questions? Because we don't want but so many.
So I think it's really important because we're all talking about complex and challenge, like difficult topics, but sometimes it might be math materials.
Oh,
like
yes, it is.
Supplemental math worksheets.
It is.
So I think there has to be something about standards alignment and the level of rigor. And I wouldn't want to use the word rigor because it's just overused and obscure. But I think that's a big piece of this too, is this the best possible material?
To teach that standard.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the language and the engaging part does this, like we could change it around.
Which one, the new one or the old one?
Engaging on the new checklist, the
Yeah.
revised
Okay.
checklist. Resource provides a range of cognitive demand and varied ways in which learners can engage with instruction. I think range of cognitive demand, I think that's appropriate more so than rigor, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I might need to practice my math facts, but if I do that, 10 times, I don't know that that's a range, right?
Or is it answer these addition problems and color in the picture? Color by number. Right. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
like step it up a little here.
Yeah.
The question I like is is it from a reputable education company or author or, right, is there something to back it
Publishing
up?
company.
Versus I found this on somebody's blog that connected to Facebook,
Yes.
Where did it come from? Who wrote it? Where did it come from?
Very good
If we're
point.
teaching
good
students
point.
to
Yeah.
use reputable sources,
But
we
you're gonna
need
have
to
to
be
spell
doing
out,
the same.
because reputable can be arbitrary, so you're gonna have to spell out what that is.
Well,
Like what you just said, it didn't come from somebody's blog, or it
Right,
didn't
or
come from
self-published
anybody
or
else.
something like that.
Blog. I don't want to
You should
slam
just
people on
think
the blog.
about where it came from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Where-
agree.
And,
Not
and,
that there's a right and wrong.
and I think maybe to that.
Reputable.
And do your sources come from a variety of? Do your resources come from a variety of sources?
Right.
If you're
Right.
only choosing
Yeah.
one thing over and over, you're
Are you,
probably not.
do they come?
Do you
But-
guys consider reputable I'm not sure what they're called, but like teachers sharing with teachers.
Teacher by teacher?
Yeah, is that considered reputable?
No,
you're not
and
allowed
the main
to.
reason for that is not this type of things, but the standard and the alignment and the rigor. So they might say this is a third grade standard, or this is third grade, and it's really second grade here. So that's why that is not where we go.
No, I'm just curious because that
Like,
seems
there's
to
no
be
vetting process
There's
on that
no
one.
vetting at all.
Oh, okay.
You and I could put something up there to make some money and
Okay,
yeah.
and it sounds good, so they would pay us, okay.
But I will say about that sometimes teachers go on blogs or Teachers Pay Teachers or whatever resource for things that are as simple as a graphic organizer that they would like to use, but they don't want to create it. Oh, here's somebody else that made this exact same graphic organizer that I want to use. Why should I recreate it when it's right there? So I do think that
So certain things are okay, but-
even non-reputable resources still could potentially have value, and we don't want our teachers to always have to reinvent the wheel, right?
But I think you're talking about a chart, and I think
Right.
we're thinking more about text and video and media, right? So things where people, words are there.
So does this only apply to, so I think then if that's the case, then I think we have to spell that out too then.
Well, I don't see a time, and I don't know, you guys help me. I don't think we're saying that, first of all, I think we're moving away, and of course, these ladies, along with their counterparts, will make the decisions. But I think this body has moved away from a checklist, and we're doing guiding questions, right? So I think the guiding questions would not be on just the 3 circles and a Venn diagram. I think it's really text that we're talking about, or media, sound, or something to that nature, if I understand everybody correctly.
I mean, that's what I hear.
Yeah.
I hear that we're talking about additional materials we are bringing into our classroom outside of our core that are being used to teach a standard. That could then be.
And then we're going to ask these guiding questions, and for the most part, we hope we can ask them in POCs, right? We do have to recognize at high school, there's a lot of high school teachers who are solo guys. I know a lot of this we're putting on this elementary lens, but this is the people this is going to affect more than anybody else. So then it comes to, they're asking these questions, and what I would say is maybe we put a statement in about, if you're answering yes, have a discussion with your department chair, your principals, just to get different perspectives. It's like another way, because if you say go to your principal for this, there again, the principal's going to be doing this all day. Because we have to do something that is manageable, or people just not going to do it.
Let's stop and think for a minute. We do this, and then a parent shows up and says, I object to XYZ. What did you use to approve this material? So think for a minute. What would that? The checklist was a really handy thing. Oh, we had a checklist, didn't get filled out, whatever. So obviously, you're saying it's almost impossible to do the checklist, and just that has to be taken into consideration by the seven.
You can be honest.
For example, I'm thinking about in my RISE program. We're trying to engage our students, and we're trying to connect with them with song lyrics and things that they know. Some of those things are going to be complex.
Yeah. I want you to know she said it. She said controversial twice.
I know, and then, but Miss Craybill told me, complex. But I also
So, for them to say, hey, for this warm-up activity where I've got them breaking up into pairs for this one song lyric, I got to go through this checklist.
Yeah,
that's hard.
It seems pretty unrealistic
It is.
today.
But if I've got some basic questions, am I thinking about different perspectives? Am I hearing everybody's perspectives? I think that gives them some keeping it simple, and they can kind of run through that, on a daily basis with the things that they're doing. I think.
But let's assume that something happens, and we're
that's
there, and we're saying, here's how we reach this decision. Whatever we create has to be able to stand up under the intense pressure and scrutiny that we just did. So just keep that in mind as you talk about this, because we have to think you know, there's two sides to everything. How's it gonna be on the other end if there's a challenge, and theoretically, there's always a challenge to everything. So how will it hold up under the scrutiny? If it's just guideline questions. I like guideline questions in the thing. I like it.
But I think that is just something in addition. I think how it holds up is the policy itself. I think the policy is extremely strong. You know, and then we still have MTAC for those things. I mean, we're not saying get away with MTAC. We could maybe break out what we do, and I would go to the doc here. We could maybe break out here where we say MTAC for curriculum, and I know one of our board members have suggested that. I don't have a problem with that. MTAC for curriculum, MTAC for media, or we could blend the two together. What do you think?
I wouldn't call it MTAC for curriculum, but I could see curriculum being a different committee.
Yeah.
You know, media that isn't their expertise.
Right, exactly. And so maybe we put something like that in there too.
Can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
This has really, really been helpful, but she's got a lot of pressure on her to come up with something. We can't wait 3 months to meet again. So can we meet again soon?
Yeah, and that sounds great. We can. I love it because then it's not on us. So we can work together. This team right here, and when I say this team, guys, the way I see it is we kind of start drafting this, and we allow you to put in some comments, and then when we come back, we're kind of bringing where we are and what this looks like. So I mean, and we'll have to. We can't schedule it now, but we can say we can meet again in November. Is everybody okay with that? First of November?
When is 3200 coming back to policy committee?
They were very understanding and said, let's get it right.
This has to be figured out.
Yeah, the board, and I just want to say this, I'm not tooting your horns. I just want to say, I know how everybody feels here, good about being able to say what they truly feel, and you guys are not, you're open to it. And I think that's appreciated. No matter how you vote, just being heard, I think is valuable and we appreciate it. So I just want to say that because, you know, the team here, it's not easy to say your thoughts in front of board members. Am I correct? But I think everybody here has felt comfortable to say what they think.
We want your opinion. You're in the trenches, and you know there's this chatter that we don't respect the teachers, and that's just absolutely not true. We have this event that we're trying to put Band-Aids on the system. You know, we have to respond to it so that hopefully we never have to go through that again. And that's my goal. That was arduous, just enormously painful and enormously destructive. I don't want to go through it again.
And what I can do is, let's try to aim for the third week in October. Then that way maybe we can take something to the board in November. What do y'all think?
There's some kind of training in October.
Okay. November, I think.
Board training is in November.
The third week October, isn't it? Yeah.
No, November.
It's in November.
It's November 14th and 15th.
There's something in October. It's a thing in Asheville.
Okay.
That's the law conference.
Yeah. October might be hard to get, but we'll aim for the end of October, 1st of November, everyone. And Ms. Smith will start working on, what she'll do is she'll start making sure our board members, she has to make sure Ms. Bradford is available as the chair. And we want to make sure that it works for everybody, it's nothing big. What I would ask of you though is to share this with some of your colleagues, and I would ask you to bring a friend next time.
Yeah.
We need more voices at the table. If you could bring a friend. And then hopefully the goal is, once we meet then, we could actually bring a recommendation to the board November, December. And I think that would give the teachers a nice breathe, and because they want to know what's coming with this.
And give us time to get some teacher feedback.
Right, some more teacher feedback, yes.
Could we meet like before or after policy committee, since several of us have to be here for policy committee, and then?
But they would be pulling out the teachers out of the classrooms. Yeah.
Quickly before we
We
go.
just have to send out one of those invitations that everybody turns in.
Yeah, Miss
Miss
Smith will work on that for us.
Two very quick things before we go, because I know we're out of time here. I just wanted to remind, for anybody who's watching, that parents can access the curriculum overviews by going to the homepage and to the Division of Academic Accountability, and then to Curriculum and Instruction, so they can see the curriculum overviews for what their children are learning. And then also give a chance, just a reminder that on Wednesday, we're having a celebration of success. There's quite a bit to celebrate in the district, and we want to make sure that teachers are honored and celebrated for the work they do. So we look forward to seeing lots of teachers there on Wednesday, and hopefully many of you as well.
Can I ask one departing question? So, you know how in the sex ed curriculum, parents are allowed to opt out. Of late, I've been getting some comments where parents want to opt out of social studies if they don't want to learn about this, or they want to opt out of core instruction. So I think that as we're presenting this in policy and we're talking about it, parents have to be, if you are in public education, then you have to have the core instruction. And so this is not meant to talk about any of that, but there is chatter about how do I opt my kid out? I don't want to hear about, slavery, or I don't want to hear about whatever the controversial topic is. So I think that as you guys are talking, we need to just make that kind of clear, that we're in public schools.
Yes, we have to teach the North Carolina.
Yes, yes.
Thank you all very much for being here.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.